Hello, everyone. I'm Kamraun.
And I'm Billy. Welcome to the Horse Frog Podcast, home of your two favorite professional digressors.
Today, we will be discussing Book 4, Chapter 23 of Memories of Ice, a novel in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. This is part 3 of our coverage of this chapter.
Like part 3 of 15, right?
No, this is part 3 of 3.
Oh, okay.
But we do have, I believe Chapter 25 is going to be a minimum of 5 parts.
Yeah, it's long. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be great, but it's going to be a long chapter.
Things are happening at an increased pace. I feel like every week something big is happening now. We're at the stage where only big things are happening.
Yes, it's all big. It's all the payout. All payouts are coming out now, so here we go. So this podcast series is intended to be a companion to reading or listening to the books set in the Malazan universe. It's not a book review, and it's most definitely not a replacement to reading the books. Both Kamraun and I know that this series is the best fantasy story ever written, and we're approaching this from a purely fanboy point of view. There'll be no literary critique of Mr. Erikson's series.
We'll be covering the events of the books in a linear fashion. There will be spoilers for those that haven't read the books. We'll try not to spoil anything prior to us covering that portion of the respective book.
Now, a quick warning, today's episode contains descriptions of adult topics not suitable for children.
Yeah, and quite a bit of violence as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Our show is listener supported. If you'd like to support us, we'd really appreciate it. You can do so by visiting our Patreon link on our website at horsefrogproductions.com. Currently, we're posting ad-free episodes on Patreon weekly.
Yeah, I don't mean to laugh at that, talk about the adult topics and then ha ha ha. I mean, I'm not a bloodthirsty maniac. So just kind of letting it out there, folks.
I think it's more the delivery of the warning that has become amusing at this point, how we choose to approach the disclaimer.
The warning. Yes, I agreed. So also, we'd really like to hear from you, and we really do mean that. So send any feedback or comments that you have to contact@horsefrogproductions.com.
All right, Chapter 23, Part 3. A sea storm had struck Marek sometime since his desertion, toppling ornamental trees and heaping seaweed-tangled dunes of sand against building walls. The streets were buried beneath an unmarred, evenly rippled white carpet of sand, leaving no bodies or other detritus visible. Even if the city had still been occupied, I feel like this storm would have been quite catastrophic for its inhabitants. For the streets to have this much sand in them, along with the toppling of the trees, it sounds like they had significant flooding and winds.
Yeah, probably like a tsunami or a hurricane or something like that.
Yeah, that's the picture that I got.
Yeah, and I have that image quite easily because I'm new to having had a heavily flooded area where I live. Kerrville's experienced these epic flooding here, and the one thing I had not expected to see is all the trees laid down. It's really weird looking. I can see through places.
Yeah, the force of water is something that you cannot underestimate. Some people think they can drive through it. No way. Cars get swept away like it's nothing.
I know it.
And to try and walk through it, that's a whole other thing.
That is one of the horrific images left to me from this stuff. Rescue workers or recovery people at this point looking at something, and you realize what you're looking at is a car laying on its side buried. They're standing on what appears to be the bed of the floor on the ground of where the river had flooded and run over, and there's a car on its side buried that deep underneath.
Like trees and branches and stuff?
Just not even trees and branches, just straight mud, buried in the mud. That vehicle is buried in the mud. You're like, holy moly, that thing is buried all the way. And it's like, that's kind of horrific when you see it like that.
Yeah, that's terrible. Corlat rode alone down the port city's main thoroughfare. Apart from what came with the warm wind's steady sigh, there was no movement down the length of the street, nor in the alleys intersecting it. Windows and doorways gaped black and forlorn. The warehouses had been stripped bare, their wide sliding doors facing onto the street left open. She approached the westernmost reaches of the city, the smell of the sea behind her giving way to a sweeter taint of freshwater decay from the river beyond the warehouses on her left. Caladan Brood, Calor, and the others had elected to ride round Marek, inland, on their way to the flats, Crone flying overhead for a time, before once more winging away. Corlat had never known the matron Great Raven to be so rattled. If indeed the loss of contact meant that Animander Rake and Moonspawn had been destroyed, then Crone had lost both her master and her murder's roost. Unpleasant notions, both, more than enough to crook the Great Raven's wings with despair as she continued on, south once more. I hadn't considered the loss of her roost when she was throwing her fit in Brood's tent the last time we saw her. I can see how that would be unnerving.
That's true. No place to hang her beak, I guess.
Yeah.
I apologize. That's very rude.
She is the matron, so it is her murder of crows.
That's true.
If she thinks she lost all of that, that's significant loss.
That is significant loss. We have no idea how many great ravens there are, but there appear to be a pretty significant number of them.
Right. Corlat had decided to ride alone, taking a route longer than the others through the city. There was no need for haste, after all, and anticipation had a way of drawing out any stationary wait, better than to lengthen the approach at a controlled pace. There was much to think about, after all. If her lord was well, then she would have to stand before him and formally sever her service, ending a relationship that had existed for 14,000 years, or, rather, suspending it for a time. She thought, for the remaining years of a mortal man's life. And if some calamity had befallen Rake, then Corlat would find herself the ranking commander to the dozen Tistandi who, like her, had remained with Rude's army. She would make that responsibility short-lived, for she had no wish to rule her kin. She would free them to decide their own fates. Rake had unified these Tistandi by strength of personality, a quality Corlat well knew she did not share. The disparate causes in which he chose to engage himself and his people were, she had always assumed, each a reflection upon a single theme. But that theme and its nature had ever eluded Corlat. There were wars, there were struggles, enemies, allies, victories, and losses. A procession through centuries that seemed random not just to her, but to her kin as well. A sudden thought came to her, twisting like a dull knife in her chest. Perhaps Rake was equally lost. Perhaps this endless succession of causes reflects his own search. I had all along assumed a simple goal, to give us a reason to exist, to take upon ourselves the nobility of others for whom the struggle meant something. Was that not the theme underlying all we have done? Why do I now doubt? Why do I now believe that, if a theme does indeed exist, it is something other, something far less noble? She attempted to shake off such thoughts, before they dragged her towards despair. She thought, for despair is the nemesis of the Tistandi. How often have I seen my kin fall on the field of battle, and have known, deep in my soul, that my brothers and sisters did not die through an inability to defend themselves. They died because they had chosen to die, slain by their own despair. Our gravest threat. Does Animander Rake lead us away from despair? Is that his only purpose, his only goal? Is his a theme of denial? If so, then, dear Mother Dark, he was right in seeking to confound our understanding, in seeking to keep us from ever realizing his singular, pathetic goal. And I should never have pursued these thoughts, should never have clawed my way to this conclusion. Discovering my Lord's secret holds no reward. Curse of the light. He has spent centuries evading my questions, discouraging my desire to come to know him, to pierce through his veil of mystery. And I have been hurt by it. I have lashed out at him more than once, and he has stood before my anger and frustration, silent, to choose not to share what I had seen as arrogance, as patronizing behavior of the worst sort, enough to leave me incensed. Ah, Lord, you held to the hardest mercy, and if despair assails us, it assails you 100-fold. Corlat's realization that the Tistandi who died had died due to giving into despair sounds a lot like people who are fighting a terminal illness, and once they lose that fire, the will to live, they often die very quickly.
Yeah, that sounds very much like it. I think that's a big thing I think he's an interesting statement here about all life needs something to do, or we give up.
Yeah. Do you think that's specific to sentient life? Do lower animals that may not have the same consciousness and ability to think have the same linkage between the desire to live and survival?
I've assumed that the lower life forms just are. Again, these are my presumptions. I haven't read or know anything about this, but they just kind of function like ants. Ants break down things. It's like, we got a job to do, boys. Let's go break it down. Things that more sentient lifestyle, I'm assuming, has to make direct choices for things. So yeah, I think I'm like you. If you lose, and so this goes back to our talk about this, about if you lose a fire to live, then that even happens with animals. Animals get to a point where they're sick enough, they just lay down and die too.
Yeah. So you think of the lions, that you've seen those pictures of them where there's one that's like on the verge of death and he can barely walk.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems that as long as they can hunt and kill, they will.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's a conscious decision to have that will to live or not. It's an interesting question. I guess unless you commune with animals, you'll never know the answer to it.
Exactly. So funny you said, I've been reading Animal Man comics lately. That's the only guy I know that does that. But he doesn't really commune with them.
Okay.
He just borrows their powers.
Yeah, not like the Deep or Aquaman, right?
Right. The Deep. Nice. Talk to those rowdy groupers.
Corlat knew now she would not release her kin. Like Rake, she could not abandon them, and like Rake, she could voice no truth when they begged or demanded justification. She thought, and so, should that moment come soon, I must needs find strength. The strength to lead, the strength to hide the truth from my kin. Oh, Whiskey Jack, how will I be able to tell you this? Our desires were simplistic, foolishly romantic. The world holds no paradise for you and me, dear lover. Thus, all I can offer is that you join me, that you stay at my side, and I pray to Mother Dark, how I pray that it will, for you, be enough. Marik's outskirts persisted along the river's edge. The settlement reached upriver to the very edge of the flats, and indeed a half-score shacks on stilts connected by raised causeways encroached upon the ready sweep of mud itself. Twin lines of poles on this side of the river marked out the wide underwater trench that had been excavated, leading to the edge of the flats, where broad, solid platforms had been built. River Marik's mouth to the east was impassable to all but the most shallow drafted craft, for its bed constantly shifted beneath the clash of tide and current, raising hidden bars of sand in the span of a few bells, then sweeping them away to create others elsewhere. Supplies brought downriver offloaded west of the mouth, here at the flats. Brood, Calor, Outrider Hurlakel, and Corlat's second, Orphantal, stood on the platform, their horses tethered on the road at the platform's inland edge. All four men faced upriver. Corlat guided her horse onto the causeway linking the city and the platform. As she reached the slightly higher elevation of the raised road, she saw the first of the Malazan barges. Sorcery had aided in their construction, she concluded. They were solid, sound craft, flat-bottomed and broad. Massive, untrimmed logs framed the hulls. Tarpaulins roofed at least half of each deck. She saw no fewer than 20 of them from her vantage point. She thought, even with sorcery, building these must have been a huge undertaking. Then again, to have completed them so quickly. Ah, is this what the Black Maranth were up to all this time? If so, then Dujek and Whiskey Jack had planned for this from the very beginning. Great ravens circled the flotilla, their shrieks audibly derisive. Soldiers, bargass, and horses were visible on the lead barge. At the inland edge of the platform, Corlat reined in beside the greeting party's horses, dismounted. A Reeve collected the reins. She nodded her thanks and strode the length of the platform to come alongside Brood.
You know, the problem with these derisive great ravens is they actually speak. What if they're actually hassling folks? Hey, Megan. Hey, fatso. It's like, move that. You know?
Do you think that any of them besides Crone can actually speak? Have we heard any other ones speaking?
We've heard them speak to her.
Right.
One has spoken to her. That may not be that other people can understand. That may just be that she can understand them.
Birds speak.
Birds speak, exactly. So, but yeah, it's like, hey, you think I can hit that fat guy down there, though? It's like, do you wonder what they're asking each other? Yeah. Do it.
So, on the topic of speaking birds, my parents have an African gray, and we got her about 20 years ago.
Okay.
And I tried to give her the nickname Piggy. Apparently, she interpreted me as Piggy, so I became Piggy. Every time I'd walk in the room, she'd say Piggy to me. So that backfired on me.
And so that's kind of a young bird then still, right?
Well, we had gotten her secondhand. She had already had one owner. We weren't exactly sure how old she was, a couple years at least. But we thought it was a male. This was when the Harry Potter books were coming out initially, so I named her Albus, thinking it was a male, and then she laid an egg a couple years later. So
wow.
Found out she was a female. Apparently that happens with people with parrots. Sometimes you don't know. If the coloring is really obvious, then you might be able to tell, but if it's not, then, it's a surprise.
I start talking about talking birds and I get the Monty Python parrot sketch going in my head.
I haven't seen that one.
Oh my gosh, dude. That's one of their most famous ones. It's the guy who's trying to return a parrot to the pet store because it's dead.
Mm-hmm.
He says, but I noticed that you'd nailed his feet to the, to the whatever, to the little bar there for me. He goes, that's to keep him from taking off like a shot, mate. He's like, he says, it's a Norwegian. He says, why is he lying on his back? And he's not. He's just pining, mate. He's pining for what's he pining? He's pining for the fjords. So whenever, I'm sorry, I just can't think of birds without pining for the fjords. Oh.
Brood's face revealed no expression, whilst Calor's was twisted into an ugly sneer. Orphantal moved to join Corlat, bowing his greeting. In their native tongue, he said, "Sister, was the ride through Marek pleasing?" Korlat asked, "How long have you been standing here, brother?" Orphantal said, "Perhaps a bell and a half." Korlat said, "Then I have no regrets." He smiled and said, "A silent bell and a half at that. Almost long enough to drive a Tistandi to distraction." Korlat said, "Liar. We can stand around in silence for weeks, as you well know, brother." Orphantal said, "Ah, but that is without emotion, is it not? I know for myself, I simply listen to the wind, and so am not troubled." She glanced at him and thought, "Without emotion? Now you're lying is no jest." He went on, "And I dare say the tension still rises." Calor growled, "You two, speak a language we can understand, if you must speak at all. There's been enough dissembling here to last a lifetime." Orphantal faced him and said in Daru, "Not your lifetime, surely, Calor." Calor bared his teeth in a silent snarl. Brood rumbled, "That will do. I'd rather the Malazans not see us bickering." Man, I got a flash here. It's like trying to get your kids to behave after an hour-long car ride when visiting someone. I feel for him here, like the kids are at each other's throats. You're going to visit some extended family member and you're trying to get them to behave in the presence of people. Oh, man. It's tough.
Brood has been doing this for years. Especially with Calor. It's like, dude, shut up. It's Calor, shut up. I'm going to tell you, I have to tell you, shut up one more time. This hammer's going in your forehead, dude.
I think we get close to that here coming up. The closest we've gotten.
Yeah, I think so.
Korlat could see Whiskey Jack now, standing near the broad, blunt bow of the lead barge. He was helmed in full armor. Humbrol Tar stood beside him, his coin hauberk glittering. The Barghast was clearly enjoying the moment, standing tall and imperious, both hands resting on the heads of the throwing axes belted to his hips. Artanthos hovered in the background, arms crossed, a half smile on his lean face. Soldiers were manning the sweeps, shouting to one another as they guided the craft between the poles. The maneuver was deftly done, as the huge barge slipped from the stronger current and glided gently down the approach. Korlat watched, her eyes on Whiskey Jack, who had in turn seen her, as the craft drew closer to the platform. The crunch and grind as the barge came alongside the landing was muted. Soldiers with lines poured from the side onto the platform and made fast. Out on the river, the other barges were each pulling towards the shore to make their own landing along the muddy strand. Hitan appeared between her father and Whiskey Jack and pushed forward to leap onto the platform. There was no color in her face and her legs almost buckled beneath her. Orphantal rushed forward to offer a supporting arm, which he batted away with a snarl before stumbling past them all towards the far end of the platform. Humbroltar laughed and his voice boomed as he said, "Well thought, but if you value your life, Tistandi, leave the last to her gravid misery. Warlord, thank you for the formal greeting. We've hastened the day to Coral, yes?" The Barghast war chief stepped onto the platform, Whiskey Jack following. Brood growled, "Unless there's another 100 barges upstream, you've lost 2/3 of your forces. Now, how did that come to be?" Humbroltar grinned and said, 3 clans came for the float, Warlord. The rest elected to walk. Our spirit gods were amused, yes? Though, I grant you, sourly so. Whiskey Jack said, "Well met, Warlord. We'd not the watercraft to carry the entire force, alas. Thus, Dujek One-Arm decided to split the army." Calor said, "And where in Hood's name is he? As if I need to ask." Whiskey Jack shrugged and said, "The Black Maranther taking them." Calor snapped, "To Coral, yes. To what end, Malazan? To conquer the city in the name of your empire?" Whiskey Jack said, "I doubt that is possible. But if it were, would you so dearly resent arriving at a pacified Coral, Calor? If your bloodlust needs appeasing." Calor said, "I never thirst for long, Malazan," one gauntleted hand lifting towards the bastard sword strapped to his back. Again, all I can think is he needs to calm down. In 2 books, we've yet to see a single instance of him backing up this claim to violence. He's Billy Bob Thornton in Tombstone at this point.
Let's skin that smoke wagon and see what happens. Dude, that is one of the most prime examples. I had never heard this term until recently, the FAFO.
Oh, yeah.
The fool around, find out.
Yes.
This is a prime example in film of fool around and find out. And but yes, I love that. And I had to thank you for saying that, because I had to look that up before we watched the show. I had to watch that scene just to see him say it. I'm like, oh gosh, that's amazing. I need to watch Tombstone.
It's so classic.
Especially with the passing of the late, great Val Kilmer, I have not really done any Val tribute movie watching.
The last movie I saw him in recently was Top Gun Maverick, and he couldn't talk in that. His voice was very weak. Yeah,
when I've seen him in so long ago, I think I set out to rewatch Heat, because I have the definitive edition of Heat. But sometimes you got to be in a mood for that one, dude. I don't just throw heat in. It's like, let's just throw heat in. It's like, no, you don't just throw heat on. Or at least I don't. I need some reason to watch something so masterful and heavy at the same time, because that's a heavy movie.
It is. You have to be ready for that. It's a long movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of mixed emotions as you're watching it. Likable characters, bad things happening to them, making bad choices.
Yeah. I think I've asked you, this is not Val Kilmer, but did you ever watch Thief by Michael Mann as well?
I started watching it. I think I stopped after about 20 minutes. I never got around to finishing it.
Okay. It's odd because in a weird way, I feel that Michael Mann has remade a movie twice, or has not remade a movie twice, but he's had Manhunter's one of my favorite movies of his. He's had that remade. He didn't have it remade. I feel Heat is almost like a remaking of Thief in a way. Thief is a tighter, leaner flick, and Heat is the more cinematic. I've had years of cinematic approach. I've had years to my name. I now have the money and have made this to a fine movie. But Heat has some elements of truth in it, very lightly. But do you remember the group of the ex-soldiers that were robbing some banks there in California in the 80s?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's what that's a shout out to, kind of. It's a play on that.
Okay. I know that he did a TV movie or a miniseries that also was basically the same story as Heat.
Okay.
So if that's the case, he's been perfecting this formula through multiple mediums and instances where he finally perfected it with Heat.
You know what it is? Heat is actually the best, his best. I'm going to say something. I'm not trying to aggravate anyone. This is praise, people. He is Miami Vice all the way through and through. He's kind of like the television. He's the creator of Miami Vice, I believe. So it's one of these things that Heat is the ultimate version of Miami Vice.
Yeah, and then Miami Vice, the movie, he directed that as well.
Dude, I know it. And I love that too.
I do. I love that movie. It's flawed a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
But the cinematics in that are just incredible.
I'm a simp for Michael Mann movies. I just love that guy.
I didn't like the Johnny Depp movie that he did. Public Enemies.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that with
John Dillinger. I could not get into that. And then after that, he did...
I loved Collateral, dude. Did you like Collateral?
Collateral was incredible. Yeah.
Dude, Collateral's amazing, man. I just watched that not that long ago. It's amazing. He did The Keep. Did you ever watch The Keep?
No.
The Keep is based on, it's one of these, it's a horror story. It's a fantastic horror story. The studio butchered it, and there's rumors of it going to be remade, but it had Ian McKellen in it. It had some other people in it. It's real 80s. The idea is that it's World War II. Nazis come to this small town in the mountains in Transylvania-ish area, and in this ancient keep awakens a vampiric type of entity who's very powerful, very ancient. I love The Keep. It's a very flawed movie. It's very 80s. It's one of his first movies, but I love it because you're going to see what Michael Mann was going to become, and what he did with a movie that's still flawed, that they butchered underneath him, still comes out okay in a weird way.
Okay. Black Hat was, I think, the last movie I saw that he did, and I didn't really like it that much.
Yeah, I didn't care for Black Hat either. It was kind of weak. I wanted to like it a lot.
So yeah, I think Collateral and Miami Vice are kind of the last two movies that I saw of his that I enjoyed.
Yeah, agreed.
And then we didn't mention Last of the Mohicans, but great movie.
That's a great movie, dude. Goes without saying.
Ignoring Calor, Brood said, "It seems that there have been considerable changes to what we had agreed was a sound plan. Indeed, that plan was clearly created with deceit in your mind from the very start." Whiskey Jack said, "I disagree. Just as you had Moonspawn and whatever Rake intended to do with it as your own private plan, we concluded that we'd best fashion something similar. The precedent is yours, Warlord, so I do not think you are in a position to voice complaint." Brood grated, "Commander, we had never intended Moonspawn to launch a preemptive strike on Coral in order to gain advantage over our presumed allies. The timing we have held to has been towards a combined effort." Whiskey Jack said, "And Dujek still agrees with you, Warlord, as do I. Tell me, has Crone managed to get close to Coral?" Brood said, "She attempts to do so yet again." Whiskey Jack said, "And she will likely be driven back once more, meaning we've no intelligence as to the preparations being made against us. If the Panyan-Seer or his advisors have even a modicum of military acuity, they will have set up a trap for us, something we cannot help but march into by virtue of drawing within sight of Coral's walls. Warlord, our Black Maranth have delivered Captain Perrin and the bridge burners to within 10 leagues of the city, to make a covert approach and so discover what the Panyans have devised. But the bridge burners alone are not sufficient to counter those efforts, whatever they may be. Thus Dujek leads 6,000 of the host, delivered by the Black Maranth, with the intention of destroying whatever the Panions have planned. Calor said, and why in Hood's name should we believe you? You've done nothing but lie since the very beginning. Whiskey Jack shrugged once more and said, if 6,000 Malazan soldiers are sufficient to take Coral and destroy the Panion Daman, then we have seriously overestimated our enemy. I don't think we have. I think we're in for a fight, and whatever advantage we can achieve beforehand, we will likely need. Brood said, Commander, the Panion forces are augmented with mage cadres, as well as these unnatural condors. How does Dujek hope to defend against them? Your army has no sorcerers to speak of. Whiskey Jack said, Quick Ben's there, and he's found a means to access his warrens without interference. Secondly, they have the Black Maranth to challenge for control of the skies, and a respectable supply of munitions. But I will grant you, it might not be enough. Brood said, You might see more than half your army slaughtered, Commander. Whiskey Jack said, It's possible, Warlord. Thus, if it is agreeable to you, we should now make all haste to Coral. Calor snarled. Indeed, perhaps we'd be better off to leave the Panions to exhaust themselves destroying Dujek and his 6,000, and then we arrive. Warlord, hear me. The Malazans have fashioned their own potentially fatal situation, and now come begging that we relieve them of the cost. I say, let the bastards rot. Real quick on his point, I actually kind of see Calor's perspective here. This decision was made without their inputs, them being Brood's camp.
Yeah.
I could see how the Malazans saying, hey, we're going to need to support this forward force that we sent without talking to you guys. It's a little suspect because you're forcing the choice on them without them having any input.
Yeah, and what's funny, though, is that these old boys are all no stranger to the odd combat or the odd war, shall we say, Calor and or Brood. They might would have done something similar. Are they just pissed that they didn't think about it first?
I don't know, because it depends on what they think is actually happening here. If they truly believe the Malazans are trying to conquer the city before they get there, okay, that doesn't look good. But similarly, if you're going to have to fast march your army, exhausting them to get there, then it's a tactical decision that probably should have been made with everybody. So I see both sides here.
Yeah. The thing that I guess it's the question to me, first off, we know Calor. Calor's just a piece of crap. He's trying to get everyone stirred up. He just hates the Malazans. He just hates the Malazans.
He hates everybody.
He does. He's a nihilist, Donnie. He hates everybody. So it's like, but this guy, his hatred of everybody is always trying to pull people apart. So you can just never. Calor, I always just think with a grain of salt. So I'm just concerned. How will Brood take this? I hope Brood is not offended, and I hope it doesn't affect what's coming up.
Yeah, when we just said Calor hates everybody, something just flashed for me. So in Hell or High Water, there's a quote where they're in this casino in Oklahoma where they're laundering the money. One of the brothers, he's kind of a hellraiser. He's winning a bunch of money at this, it might have been blackjack or poker table. And there's a Native American guy there, real mean-looking guy, getting pissed off at him. After the brother gets up to take his winnings, the Comanche guy stands up and he gets in his face and he says, do you know what Comanche means? The brother says no. And the Comanche guy says, it means enemies forever, everyone. I just got the picture of Calor. Basically, he just hates everybody. Everybody's his enemy. He's just full of hate. And he kind of reminded me of this guy.
If there's no one there, he's going to find something to fixate on to hate. He's going to hate that chair. It's like, dude, beware. It's like, good gracious, he's going to find something to hate.
Yeah, definitely. Corlat sensed that Calor's judgment reached through to Brood. She saw the warlord hesitate and said, a rather petty response, stained by emotion, therefore probably tactically suicidal on all our parts. Calor wheeled and exclaimed, you, woman, cannot pretend to objectivity. Of course you'd side with your lover. Corlat said, if his position was untenable, I most certainly would not, Calor. And there lies the difference between you and me. She faced Caladan Brood and said, I now speak for the Tistandi accompanying your army, warlord. I urge you to hasten our march to Coral, with the aim of relieving Dujek. Commander Whiskey Jack has arrived with sufficient barges to effect a swift crossing to the south shore. 5 days of quick march will bring us within sight of Coral. Calor said, or 8 days at a normal pace, ensuring that we arrive well rested. Is One Arm's host so overrated that they cannot hold out an extra 3 days? Orphantal said, trying a new tack, to Calor, who shrugged. Brood's breath hissed between his teeth. He said, he now speaks with reasoned consideration, Tistandi. 5 days or 8. exhausted or rested, and thus capable of engaging the enemy at once. Which of the two is more tactically sound? Whiskey Jack said, it could mean the difference between joining a sound, efficacious force and finding naught but chopped-up courses. He shook himself, then went on. Decide what you will, then. We will leave you the barges, of course, but my forces will cross first. We'll risk the exhaustion. He swung about and gestured towards Artanthos, who had remained on the barge. The standard-bearer nodded, reached down, and collected a half-dozen signal flags, then set off towards the stern. Calor hissed, You anticipated this, didn't you? Corlat said, That you would win the day? Yes, I think he did. Whiskey Jack said nothing. Calor went on. And so, your forces reached Coral first, after all. Very clever, bastard. Very clever indeed. Corlat stepped up to Brood and said, Warlord, do you hold to your faith in the Tistandi? Brood frowned and said, To you and your kin? Aye, of course I do. Corlat said, Very well, then we will accompany Commander Whiskey Jack, Humboltar and their forces, and so represent your interests. Orphantal and I are soul-taken. One of us can, if need be, bring swift word back to you, either of peril or of betrayal. Further, our presence might well prove decisive should it be necessary to effect Dujak's withdrawal from an unwinnable engagement. Calor laughed and said, The lovers rejoined, and we are asked to bow before false objectivity. Orphantal took a step towards Calor and quietly said, That was the last insult you will deliver to the Tistandi. Brood bellowed, Stop! Calor, know this. I hold to my trust in the Tistandi. Nothing you can say will shake that faith, for it was earned centuries ago, 100-fold, and not once betrayed. Your loyalty, on the other hand, I begin to doubt more and more. Calor growled, Beware your fears, warlord, lest you make them true. Brood's response was so low Corlat barely heard it. He said, You now taunt me, Calor? Calor slowly paled. He quietly said, What would be the value of that? Brood said, Indeed. I got the distinct impression that Calor popped off until someone of true power shut him down. That's one of those statements like a young man testing their father for the boundary, and then they finally found it, and then dad got real serious, you know?
Oh, real serious, real quick. It was the real quiet one. That was a real quiet comeback, too. I'm not sure. I know we've discussed this in the past. Is this who we discussed as Calor?
For me, it's Jason Isaac,
okay.
The guy that played Lucius Malfoy. You'd recognize him from a bunch of different movies.
Okay.
Something about the contemptuous nature that he played Lucius Malfoy with. He just personifies this type of character that thinks he's better than everybody.
Interesting. Yeah, this guy's John Noble.
Yeah, so you have a picture of him as
Denethor?
We're not going to guess. We're going to look this up because Derek is going to hold our feet to the fire. And if we don't get the right answer, we're going to get in trouble.
It's John Noble in Lord of the Rings. I know I looked it up.
Who was the steward of Gondor?
Here we go.
Denethor.
It was Denethor, right on.
So you're right. Okay, there we go.
It's funny. I popped off with some strange unknown knowledge to my wife last night. We watched Napoleon Dynamite. I've never seen that before.
Oh,
and,
God.
I did enjoy
Did you get my references?
I did enjoy I don't know if I caught any tonight.
Okay, so the lard reference.
Very thorough.
Tina, you fat
the
lard.
Reference is great. Hey, Tina, you fat lard. I did enjoy that thoroughly. That was quite amusing.
Uncle Rico.
Uncle Rico is great.
I bet I could throw a football over the mountains.
I've been seriously training for cage fights for 2 weeks now or something like that. I can't remember we've been cage fighting. But I really thoroughly enjoyed that because it was just pointless. And I was trying to tell KP about this. I said, you need to watch, if she's never watched any much Anderson, I tried to get her to watch Rushmore with me. I said, Rushmore's kind of really... Rushmore's kind of what sets this. It's the more serious version of this, but it's not serious. It's still funny. But
these are OR scrubs.
Are they? Who are they?
My favorite part of Rushmore. Man, we're digressing a lot tonight,
dude. It's deep.
It's when Bill Murray is in the car with his kids, and one of them pops off. On the topic of fathers getting the line crossed, and he turns around and slaps the shit out of that kid. It's not like a physical abuse thing, but it's definitely like he had enough. He's getting up to the kid.
These are big fellas. These are not small. These aren't like little bitty kids. No, these are like these are some football playing high school kids or rugby playing kids. These are not little bitty kids. So no. Oh, but no, I don't know what's my favorite part of that movie. I love all of his little plays, of course. That stuff is just brilliant, dude. It's just absolutely brilliant. And especially it's just Anderson just really cemented a music thing with me with slow image music and his love of the 60s. Like he's like my age from Texas. He's in love with the same era of Texas as I am, apparently. So it's a romanticized version of the 60s. We didn't grow up in. We grew up in the 70s, and we just kind of look at the architecture and the other things and like, I love this place.
Anderson's got some great movies, too.
Dude, great stuff, dude.
Corlat turned to her brother and said, "Call our kin, Orphantal. We shall accompany the commander and war chief." Orphantal said, "As you say, sister." He pivoted, then paused and studied Calor for a long moment before saying, "I think, old man, when all this is done." Calor bared his teeth and said, "You think what?" Orphantal said, "That I will come for you." Calor held his smile in answer, but the strain of the effort was betrayed by a twitch along one lined cheek. All of the scenes of Calor being Calor, I really would like to see acted out. I think it would be great.
It would be great. I agree.
Orphantal set off towards the waiting horses. Humbroltar's deep laugh broke the tense silence. He said, "And here we thought you'd be bickering when we arrived." Corlat faced the barge and met Whiskey Jack's gaze. He managed a drawn smile, revealing to her the pressure he had been feeling. But it was what she saw in his eyes that quickened her heart. Love and relief, tenderness, and raw anticipation. She thought, "Mother Dark, but these mortals live." Riding side by side at a gentle canter, Gruntle and Itkovian reached the causeway and approached the platform. The sky was paling to the east, the air cool and clear. A score of Reeve herders were guiding the last of the first 300 veteran onto the railed ramp. A few hundred paces behind the two men, the second 300 were being driven towards the causeway. There were at least 2,000 veteran to follow, and it was clear to Gruntle and Itkovian that, if they wished to lead their companies across the river anytime soon, they would have to cut in. The Malazans had built well, each barge carrying broad, solid ramps that neatly joined bow to bow, while the sterns had been designed to fit flush once the backwash guards had been removed. The bridge they formed when linked was both flexible where required and secured everywhere else, and it was surprisingly wide, capable of allowing two wagons to travel side by side. Those barges sound like some amazing engineering. I wonder which part of the army built this and how long it took them. Normally I think sappers and engineers are doing this type of work, but Corlat suspected sorcery was involved.
Yes, didn't she say Black Moranth also may have assisted with this too?
Possibly, yeah.
So, yeah, engineering with the Black Moranth, a kind of little combination heads put together, came up with this, I'm guessing.
Whiskey Jack and his companies of the hosts had crossed the river more than 15 bells ago, followed by Humbroltar's 3 clans of Barghast. Gruntle knew that Itkovian had hoped to see and meet with both men once again, in particular Whiskey Jack, but by the time they'd come within sight of the river, Malazan and Barghast were both long gone. Brood had encamped his forces for the night on this side of River Marik, rousing his troops 3 bells before dawn. They had just completed their crossing. Gruntle wondered at the disparity of pace between the two allied armies. They reined in among the Reeve herders. A tall, awkward-looking man who was not Reeve stood off to one side, watching the veteran thump their way across the first barge to hoots and whistles from the drivers. Gruntle dismounted and approached the lone man. He said, "Mott Irregulars?" The man gave a lopsided, toothy grin and said, "High Marshal Stye. I'm glad you're here. I can't understand these little guys at all. I've been trying real hard, too. I guess they're speaking a different language." How many High Marshals do you think the Mott Irregulars have in their ranks? Are all of them High Marshals?
That's been my assumption. I just thought they were all High Marshals. So, they've all earned it, apparently.
How do you come up with a group of people like this? Seriously.
I don't know. That's a good question. What if they, in fact, are all High Marshals? Like they've earned these titles.
Oh, that'd be something.
That's even more scary.
I mean, they can count to 10.
They can count to 10. You gotta watch out. I guess they'd be stuck using the metric system.
Oh, yeah. Gruntle glanced back at Itkovian, expressionless, then faced the High Marshal once more and said, "So they are. Have you been standing here long?" Stye said, "Since last night. Lots of people have crossed. Lots. I watched them put the barges together. They were fast. The Malazans know wood, all right. Did you know Whiskey Jack was apprenticed as a mason before he became a soldier?" Gruntle said, "No, I didn't. What has that got to do with carpentry, High Marshal?" Stye said, "Nothing. I was just saying." Gruntle asked, "Are you waiting for the rest of your company?" Stye said, "Not really, though I suppose they'll show up sooner or later. They'll come after the veteran, of course, so they can collect the dung. These little guys do that too. We've had a few fights over that, you know. Tussles. Good-natured, usually. Look at them. What they're doing. Kicking all that dung into a pile and guarding it. If I get any closer, they'll pull knives. Gruntle said, Then I'd suggest you not get any closer, High Marshal. Sty grinned and said, There'd be no fun then. I ain't waiting here for nothing, you know. Akovian dismounted and joined them. Gruntle swung to the herders and spoke in passable Reeve. He said, Which of you is in charge here? A wiry old man looked up, stepped forward and snapped, Tell him to go away, stabbing a finger at High Marshal Sty. Gruntle shrugged and said, Sorry, I can't order him to do anything, I'm afraid. I'm here for my legion and the Grey Swords. We'd like to cross, before the rest of your herd. The old man interrupted, No, can't do that. No, you have to wait. Wait. The Veteran don't like to be split up. They get nervous, unhappy. We need them calm on the crossing. You see that, don't you? No, you have to wait. Gruntle said, Well, how long do you think that will take? The old man shrugged and said, It will be done when it is done. The second 300 Veteran rumbled their way up the causeway. The herders moved to meet them. Gruntle heard a meaty thud, then the Reeve were all shouting, racing back. He turned in time to see High Marshal Sty, the front of his long shirt pulled up around a hefty pile of dung, run full tilt past onto the ramp, then thump down the length of the barge. A single Reeve herder, who had clearly been left to guard the dung, lay sprawled beside the looted heap, unconscious, the red imprint of a large bony fist on his jaw. Gruntle grinned over at the old herder, who was jumping about, spitting with fury. Akovian moved up alongside him and asked, Sir, did you see that? Gruntle said, No, alas, just the tail end. Akovian said, That punch came out of nowhere. I did not even see him step close. The poor Reeve dropped like a sack of... Gruntle said, Dung? After a long moment, so long that Gruntle thought it would never come, Akovian smiled. Man, these Mott irregulars are so unhinged. Everything they do is just so funny. Fighting over dung? Seriously?
Dude, it must be some really good dung. Maybe it doesn't stink when they burn it or something like that. I don't know, but it's like, the dung. Fighting for dung.
Yeah, I can attest to it. It doesn't stink when you burn it, especially if it's dried. It's just grass.
Send your best dung fighter over. We got High Marshal Style do. Maybe it's because of the fact they don't want to gather the dung up themselves. And he's just
possibly
they're just doing all the work. It's like, okay, I'm going to steal that pile of dung for our fires. You know?
Yeah, that could be it too. Rain clouds had rolled in from the sea, the rain driven on fierce winds, each drop striking iron helms, shields, and leather rain cloaks with enough force to shatter into mist. The abandoned farmland on all sides vanished behind a gray wall. The trader road churned to clinging mud beneath hooves, wagon wheels, and boots. Water sluicing down through his visor, which he had lowered in an only partially successful attempt to keep the rain from his eyes, Whiskey Jack struggled to make sense of the scene. A messenger had called him back from the vanguard, shouting barely heard words concerning a broken axle. The train halted in disarray, injured animals. It would be 2 more days, at the very least, before they reached Coral. Whiskey Jack had received no communication from Quick Ben since before Marek, and the Wizard, Perrin, and the Bridgeburners had been still half a night's travel from Coral's environs at the time. He was sure they had reached the city by now, was equally certain that Dujek and his companies were even now closing in for the rendezvous. If a battle was to come, it would be very soon. Whiskey Jack swung his horse round, nudged the weary beasts along the track's edge to return to the vanguard. Night was fast approaching, and they would have to stop, at least for a few bells. He would then have some precious time alone with Corlat. The rigors of this march had kept them apart far too often, and while he and Corlat held to the belief that her lord, Animander Rake, could not yet be counted out, she had assumed the role of commander among her Tistandee kin in all respects. Cold, remote, focused exclusively on the disposition of her brothers and sisters. They were, under her direction, exploring Curald Galain, their warren of darkness, drawing upon his power in an effort to purge it of the crippled god's infection. Whiskey Jack had seen upon their short-lived, infrequent reappearances the cost borne by Orphantal and the other Tistandee. But Corlat wanted Curald Galain's power within reach, without fear of corruption by the time battle was joined at Coral. A change had come to her, he sensed. Some bleak resolve had hardened all that was within her. Perhaps it was the possible death of Animander Rake that had forced such induration upon her spirit. Or perhaps it was their future paths they had so naively entwined without regard for the harsh demands of the real world. The past was ever restless for them both. Whiskey Jack, in his heart, was certain that Animander Rake was not dead, nor even lost. In the half-dozen late-night conversations he had shared with the Lord of Moonspawn, Whiskey Jack had acquired a sense of the Tistandee. Despite the alliances, including the long-term partnership with Caladan Brood, Anomander Rake was a man of solitude and almost pathological independence. He was indifferent to the needs of others, for whatever reassurance or confirmation they might expect or demand. Whiskey Jack thought, he said he would be there for the assault on Coral, and so he will. He was pushing his 4,000 soldiers too hard. They were the finest he had ever commanded, yet he was demanding the impossible from them. Though the Malazan understood it, Caladan Brood's sudden loss of faith had shaken Whiskey Jack, more than he would admit to anyone, even Corlat. A fast march by the combined forces might well have given the seer pause. Seeing their rival of legion upon legion would give any enemy commander incentive to withdraw from an ongoing engagement with Dujek. Exhausted or not, sometimes numbers alone proved sufficient intimidation. The Panyan resources were limited. The seer would not risk persisting in battle beyond the city's walls if it endangered his main army. The appearance of 4,000 mud-coated, stumbling soldiers was more likely to bring a smile to the seer's lips. Whiskey Jack would have to make his few numbers count. The 12 Tistandi, the Ilgris clan, and Humbroltar's elite clans of the Whiteface would most likely prove crucial, though the combined Barghast support was less than 2,000. He thought, we threw ourselves into the sprint too soon, too far from our prey. In the senseless haste, we've left 50,000 Whiteface Barghast far behind. This decision may be a fatal one. Feeling old beyond his years, burdened by flaws born of a spirit mired deep in exhaustion, Whiskey Jack rejoined the vanguard. Water streamed down the full-length chain surcoat, left long gray hair plastered against it down the back and across the wide but gaunt shoulders. Dull gray helmet gleamed, reflecting the pewter sky with milky indistinction. He stood motionless, head lowered, at the base of a shallow basin, his horse waiting a dozen paces behind him. Flat, lifeless eyes studied the saturated prairie ground through his great helm's fixed, slitted visor. Unblinking, narrowed eyes, watching the flow of muddy water slashed by the frenzied rain, tiny rivulets, broader sweeps, a ceaseless flow through minute channels over exposed stone between the knotted roots of tufted grasses. The water wended southward. And here, in this basin, carrying oddly colored silts in racing streams, it flowed uphill. Calor thought, from dust to mud. So you march with us after all. No, understand. I am pleased. Calor swung round, strode back to his horse. He rode along his own trail, and, with dusk gathering quickly beneath the leaden clouds and driving rain, came at last to the encampment. There were no fires outside the rows of tents, and the glow of lanterns was dull through patchy canvas. The muddy aisles were crowded with great ravens, hunched and motionless under the deluge. Reining in before Caladan Brood's command tent, Calor dismounted and strode within. The outrider Hurlikel stood just within the flap, present as Brood's messenger should such need arise. The young man was wan, half asleep at his station. Ignoring him, Calor raised his visor and stepped past. The warlord was uncharacteristically slumped in a camp chair, his hammer resting across his thighs. He had not bothered to clean the mud from his armor or boots. His strangely bestial eyes lifted, took in Calor, then dropped once more. He rumbled, I have made a mistake. Calor said, I agree, warlord. That earned Brood's sharpened attention. Brood said, you must have misunderstood. Calor said, I have not. We should have joined Whiskey Jack. The annihilation of One Arm's host, no matter how much that might please me personally, will be a tactical disaster for the campaign. Brood rumbled, all very well, Calor, but there is little we can do about it now. Calor said, this storm will pass, warlord. You can increase our pace come the morning. We can perhaps shave off a day. I'm here for another reason, however, one that is, conveniently, related to our change of heart. Brood said, spit it out, short and sweet, Calor, or not at all. Calor said, I would ride to join Whiskey Jack and Corlat. Brood asked, to what end? An apology? Calor shrugged and said, if that would help. More directly, however, you seem to forget my experience. For all that I seem to grate upon all of you, I have walked this land when the Talani-Mas were but children. I have commanded armies 100,000 strong. I have spread the fire of my wrath across entire continents, and sat alone upon tall thrones. Do you grasp the meaning of this? Brood said, yes. You never learn, Calor. That is a quote that I had highlighted. I absolutely love that. Yeah. Calor going on and on and on, and Brood's like, no, you never learn your lesson. And never learn from your mistake.
I love it too. I didn't have it highlighted, but it makes me laugh when I read it.
Calor snapped, clearly you do not grasp the meaning. I know a field of battle better than any man alive, including you. Brood said, the Malazans seem to have done very well on this continent without your help. Besides, what makes you think Whiskey Jack or Dujek will heed your suggestions? Calor said, They are rational men, Warlord. You forget something else about me as well, it seems. With my blade drawn, I have not faced defeat in 100,000 years. Brood said, Calor, you choose your enemies well. Have you ever crossed weapons with Animander Rake? Dasim Ultor?
Dasim Ultor.
Nice. Greymane, the Segula first? Real quick, is that the first mention we've had of Greymane in the books?
I believe so.
Interesting.
I believe that is the first time he's mentioned.
Okay, so he's thrown in with a group of individuals that we would consider very esteemed in combat.
Yes. For some reason, I seem to remember this feller's ranking.
Animander Rake was the 7th, right?
The 7th, right? 6th or 7th, yeah.
Yeah, but he was handicapping himself. He was fighting on their terms.
He was fighting on their terms, and he just fought one after. I'm assuming he just showed up, and it was just like, okay, it was like game on. It was just like one after the other lined up. Okay, we got to fight this guy. So the line must have been around the block.
Yeah.
To fight Animander Rake.
Definitely. It was like a line for autographs at an anime convention or something. You know?
Yes. Yeah. What was he doing? They said he wore a mask with no marking. So basically, was he by therefore claiming himself to be like the first or something like that, or higher?
I think so. Yeah.
Is that why they were all on him like white on rice?
Probably.
It was because he dared to not wear a ranked mask. My mask would be the black mask. And it's so many Marvins so far down on the list. Dude, it'd just be all black.
Brood did not need to add, with me, Calor growled, I will face none of them in Coral. Just Seerdamen, Erdamen, Septarchs. Brood cut in, and perhaps a Kachane Shamal or 3? Calor said, I did not think any remained, Warlord. Brood said, maybe, maybe not. I am somewhat surprised, Calor, by your sudden zeal. Calor shrugged and said, I would answer my own ill advice, that is all. Do you give me leave to join Whiskey Jack and Corlat? Brood studied him for a time, then he sighed and waved one mud-spattered, gauntleted hand, and said, Go. Calor spun and strode from the tent. Outside he approached his horse. A few miserable great ravens, huddled beneath a wagon, were the only witnesses to see his sudden smile. If Calor is smiling, then someone is going to have an unpleasant situation waiting for them in the future.
You will pay.
You will pay.
Someone is going to pay. Someone's about to pay.
The floes abutting the rocky shoreline were awash in darkly stained water. Lady Envy watched Baeljag and Gareth splash through it towards the forest-crowded strand. Sighing, she parted the veil on her warren, enough to permit her to cross without getting wet. Lady Envy had had more than enough of wild seas, black water, submerged mountains of ice, and freezing rain, and was contemplating fashioning a suitably efficacious curse upon Neruz and Beru both, the lady for her failure to maintain reasonable order upon her waters, the lord for his evidently senseless outrage at being so thoroughly exploited. Of course, such a curse might well weaken the pantheon yet further, and that would not be appreciated. Given Ruz is the path of the sea, I assume Neruz represents the ascendant or god that is responsible for that warren.
Yeah, that would be my guess. And the only thing I know about Beru is it's Beru Fend is the swear. And it's not even it's almost like, oh my gosh. It's like it's whispered in awe or fear, usually that kind of curse. And I don't know if it's a curse or more of like an exclamation.
Yeah, Beru is known as the Lord of Storms.
Oh, okay.
So that makes sense. Fend off the storms.
Okay. Oh, so they could be linked.
Yeah, they all seem to be sea linked.
Yeah. Sea deities?
Yes.
Arr.
Yeah. When I looked Neruz up, I found that it is actually established in other books that she's a female and reputedly the daughter of Male, who is the god of all the seas.
Huh.
So this may be one of those inconsistencies that we've heard about within the books.
Okay, like a Gardens of the Moon, as it were.
Yeah, they do continue through some of the books. I think there's some timeline issues that arise here or there.
You need a PhD to keep track of the timeline anyhow, man.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Given how he was writing these books on a little, almost calculator-sized device. A
word processor, right?
Yeah. Anybody younger than us is not going to know what a word processor was.
I'm so sorry.
I barely know what it is.
Right.
It's like a device that has a very small screen, monochrome, dot matrix that can barely fit maybe 256 characters on it or something.
It's a smart typewriter is essentially the best way of looking at it.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, yes. So when you're writing in that scenario, while good to have a device that lets you stay focused and you can carry around with you in a pocket, the downside is you don't have access to all your notes, keeping everything straight.
Yeah.
So you're relying on memory at that point. And these are massive books. I don't know how he kept it all straight.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know either.
Lady Envy sighed and said, "So I must forego such pleasure, or at least suspend it for a time. Oh well." Turning, she saw Senu, Thirul, and Mok clambering down the near vertical ice sheet that led down to the floe. Moments later, the Segula were sloshing their way to the shore. Lannis Tog had vanished a short while past, to reappear beneath the trees directly opposite them. Lady Envy stepped off the jagged, frost-rimed edge of the Mekros street, settled slowly towards the bridge of ice. She approached the strand's tumbled line of rocks where the others had gathered. Upon arriving, she stepped gingerly onto sodden moss and said, "Finally!" Huge cedars marched into the gloom of the slope that climbed steep and rough up the mountainside behind Lannis Tog. Brushing flecks of snow from her talaba, Lady Envy studied the unwelcoming forest for a moment, then fixed her attention on the Talani mass. Ice was slipping in long, narrow slivers from the swords impaling the Talani mass. White frost died in spreading patches on the undead creature's withered face.
Dude, take the swords out of that woman. She's not going to be able to go through any doorways, please. Help her out.
You think she's used to twisting through a doorway with those swords sticking through her?
Yes.
I guess she can just fall to dust and then just come back up on the other side.
Yeah. Good golly. It's going to be tiresome. Can't sit down. All I can do is stand around in an open area so I don't bump into things. Knock the paintings off the walls.
Yeah, that'd be really frustrating, actually. Lady Envy said, "Oh dear, you're thawing." Lannis Tog said, "I will scout ahead. People have passed along this shoreline recently. More than 20, less than 50, but some heavily laden." Lady Envy said, "Indeed?" and glanced around, but saw no sign that anyone had walked where they now stood. She asked, "Are you certain?" "Oh, never mind. I didn't ask that question." "Well, in which direction were they walking?" Lannis Tog faced east and said, "The same as us." Lady Envy said, "How curious. We will by chance catch up with them?" Lannis Tog said, "Unlikely, mistress. They are perhaps 4 days ahead." Lady Envy exclaimed, 4 days? They have reached Coral, then?" Lannis Tog said, "Yes. Do you wish to rest, or shall we proceed?" Lady Envy turned to examine the others. Baeljag still carried a spearhead in her shoulder, though it seemed to be slowly making its way out, and the flow of blood had slowed considerably. She would have liked to have healed the A's wound, but the beast would not let her come close enough. Gareth looked hale, though a solid mass of old scars etched the hound's mottled hide. The 3 Segula had effected what repairs they could to their armor and weapons, and stood waiting, their masks freshly painted. She said, "It seems there is to be no delay at all. Such eagerness! Oh, pity poor Coral." She swung round suddenly and said, "Lannis Tog, tell me, has Onos Tuolan passed this way as well?" Lannis Tog said, "I do not know, mistress. Those mortals who preceded us, however, were tracked by a predator. No doubt curious. I sense no lingering violence in this area, so the beast probably abandoned them once it fully gauged their strength." Lady Envy said, "A beast? What kind of beast, darling?" Lannis Tog shrugged and said, "A large cat. A tiger, perhaps. Forests such as these suit them, I believe." Lady Envy said, "Now, isn't that titillating? By all means, Lannis Tog, strike out on this fated trail. We shall follow upon your very heels." I suspect the footprints were made by Perrin and company as they approached Coral, and if Trake is dead now, then there's only one other large cat we've seen so far in this book, and that would be Kilava, Tool's sister, in her panther form, since she's a soul taken.
Right on. Okay, nice catch.
The trenches and tunnel entrances had been well disguised, beneath cedar branches and piles of moss, and without the preternatural skills of the mages, the bridge burners might not have found them. "Ah, so this is the great trap that Septarch Ultentha set up for the approaching forces."
Nice. Looks like the bridge burners may gonna use it against them.
Oh, yeah. Will they? Perrin made his way down what he had mentally labeled the command tunnel, passing racks of weapons, pikes, halberds, lances, longbows, and bundles of arrows, and alcoves packed solid with food, water, and other supplies, until he came to the large, fortified chamber which the Septarch had clearly intended to be his headquarters. Quickben and his motley cadre of mages sat squatted or sprawled in a rough half-circle near the far end, beyond the map table, looking like a pack of water rats who'd just taken over a beaver's lodge.
Dude.
What a description. That is a good one, actually.
What an image that really paints, too. I can see them all huddled in this one little corner, and they got all this room to move around, and they're not used to it. They're kind of huddled together trying to think, wow, it's kind of nice.
Uh-huh. Perrin glanced down at the large painted hide pinned to the tabletop as he strode past, on which the Panions had conveniently mapped out the entire maze of tunnels and entrenchments, the location of supplies and what kind, the approaches and retreats. Perrin joined the mages and said, "All right, what do you have?" Quickben said, "Someone's got wise in Coral and realized that this place should have a company holed up here, as a guard. Trotz was keeping an eye on the city and watched them file out. They'll reach us in a bell." Perrin scowled and said, "A company. What's that in Panion terms?" Quickben said 400 Becklights, 20 Erdomen, 4 Seerdomen, one of them ranking and likely a sorcerer. Perrin asked, "And which approaches do you think they'll use?" Spindle said, "The 3-stepped ones," reaching out to scratch under his hair shirt. He continued, "They go under trees all the way, lots of switchbacks, meaning the poor bastards will have a hard time rushing our positions once we let loose." Perrin turned back to study the map. He said, "Assuming they're flexible, what will they choose as an alternative?" Quickben rose and said, "The main ramp." He tapped a finger on the map and said, "The one they'd planned on using for the downward march to launch the ambush. No cover for them, but if they can lock shields out front and turtle, well, there's only 40 of us." Perrin asked, "Munitions?" Quickben looked back at Spindle, who made a sour face and said, "We're short. Maybe if we use 'em right, we'll squash this company, but then the seer will know what's up, and he'll send 20,000 up this mountainside. If Dujek doesn't show soon, we'll have to pull out, Captain." Perrin said, "I know, Spindle, which is why I want you to set aside the cussers and burners. I want these tunnels rigged. If we have to scramble, we'll leave this strong point nothing but mud and ashes." Spindle gaped and said, "Captain, without them cussers and burners, the seer won't need to send anybody after this company. It'll take us clean out." Perrin said, "Assuming there's enough of them left to regroup and come up the main ramp. In other words, Spindle, pull the sappers together and cook up the messiest stew you can for those 3 hidden trails. If we can make it seem like the whole Malazan army's up here, better yet, if we can make sure not one soldier in this company gets out alive, we'll have purchased the time we need. The less certain we leave the seer, the safer we'll be. So close that mouth and find Hedge and the rest. Your moment of glory's arrived. Spindle, go." Muttering, the man scrambled out of the chamber. Perrin faced the others and said, "A seer dominant sorcerer, you said. All right, he needs to drop fast once the fun starts. What do you have in mind, gentlemen?" Shank grinned and said, "My idea, Captain. It's classic. Deadly, especially because it's so unexpected. I've already completed the ritual, left it primed. All Quickben needs to do is tell me when he spotted the bastard." Perrin asked, "What kind of ritual, Shank?" Shank said, "The ingenious kind, Captain. Blue Pearl loaned me the spell, but I can't describe it. Can't write it down and show you, neither. Words and meanings hang around in the air, you know, seep into suspicious minds and trigger gut instinct. There's nothing to blocking it if you know what's coming. It only works when you don't." Scowling, Perrin turned to Quickben, who shrugged, then said, "Shank wouldn't cough himself to the front of the line if he wasn't sure of this, Captain. I'll sniff the seer dominant out, as he's asked, and I'll have a few backups in case it goes sour." Blue Pearl added, "Spindle will hold back on a sharper, Captain, with a mage's name on it." Toes said, "Literally, and that makes all the difference, Spin being a wizard and all." Perrin said, "Yes? And how often has it made the difference in the past, Toes?" Toes said, "Well, there's been a bad string of, mitigating circumstances." A bad string of mitigating circumstances? I'd like to hear the litany of excuses that back that up.
Oh, you've heard them. You were a manager, sir, at Fry's. You've heard them. Just consult your memory banks for any of your associates in AV's associates. I guarantee you'll find one or two that are exact same excuse.
All right. I have lived through 1,000 sales. I've heard all the excuses over millennia. Do you know what this means?
A million excuses. It's almost as bad. So I'm going to have a flashback from Mr. Show. It's like the return of the curse of the creature's ghost. It's like, what are we to be afraid of here? So it's like, I love these kind of weird things like this. It's like, oh gosh, these are so, I want to know about the mitigating circumstances, honestly.
Yeah, I do too. Given all the interactions we see with the bridge burners, I imagine they're pretty funny.
Yes. They're pretty funny. And probably pretty dark when you get down to it.
Yeah. Perrin breathed, "Abyss below. Quick, Ben, if we don't knock that sorcerer out, we'll be feeding roots a drop at a time." Quick Ben said, "We know, Captain. Don't worry. We'll stamp him out before he sparks." Perrin sighed and said, "Toes, find me picker. I want all these longbows trundled out and issued to everyone without a munition or spell in hand. 20 arrows each, and I want them to have pikes as well." Toes said, "Aye, sir," and climbed to his feet. He reached for one large, mummified toe strung around his neck and kissed it. Then he headed out. Blue Pearl spat onto the ground and said, "I feel sick every time he does that." As do I. That's a horrible image.
That is nasty.
Ugh. A bell and a half later, Perrin lay alongside Quick Ben, looking down the middle step trail where the glint of helms and weapons appeared in the late afternoon's dull light. The Panions had not bothered to send scouts ahead, nor was their column preceded by a point, a degree of overconfidence that Perrin hoped would prove fatal. And that is pretty sloppy. Complacency will see you killed, as I can attest to from an incident that happened the other night when I was playing a game with some friends.
Do tell.
So we're playing Star Citizen. We're in this thing called a contested zone where it's like a player versus the environment. So there's non-player characters there as well. And we were in kind of what you can consider a choke point, working our way towards the objective. It's in a space station. There was this hallway that's perpendicular to us that it was mostly blocked, but you could see through it. And I thought I saw some movement, but I didn't say anything about it. And then, sure enough, as we approached this 90-degree corner, this guy comes out with a light machine gun and mows all four of us down because we were kind of in a bottleneck. This is what happens when you don't have your hackles up and you're not actively taking threats seriously. You think you're doing fine, there's nothing to worry about, and you get embarrassed. You and your four friends, or three friends. It does, yes. And that was my fault, and I have to live with that.
those are the men's souls riding your shadow.
Yes. And that ended the night, by the way, because that's one of those scenarios where getting back there would be time-consuming and not worth it. So,
okay.
Unfortunate.
Okay. Were harsh DMs exchanged at this point?
No. We're all pretty understanding of our shortcomings at this point.
Okay.
In our youth, there would have been a fiery exchange.
Blame would have been placed.
Oh, absolutely. In the soft earth before Quick Ben, the wizard had set a half-dozen twigs upright in a rough line. Faint sorcery whispered between them that Perrin's eyes could only register peripherally. 20 paces behind the two men, Shank sat hunched over his modest, pebble-ringed circle of ritual, 6 twigs from the same branch that Quick Ben had used, jabbed into the moss before the squad mage, surrounding a bladder filled with water. Beads of condensation glistened from these twigs. Perrin heard Quick Ben's soft sigh. The wizard reached out, hovered an index finger over the third twig, then tapped it. Shank saw one of his twigs twitch. He grinned, whispered the last word of his ritual, releasing its power. The bladder shriveled, suddenly empty. Down the trail, the Seer-Domin sorcerer, third in the line, buckled, water spraying from his mouth, lungs filled, clawing at his own chest. Shank's eyes closed, his face runneled in sweat as he swiftly added binding spells to the water that filled the Seer-Domin's lungs, holding it down against their desperate, spasming efforts to expel the deadly fluid. Soldiers shouted, gathered round the writhing mage. 4 sharpers sailed into their midst.
Oh.
What a terrible way to go. Drowning on dry land, instantaneously having your lungs filled, not being able to cough or do anything. Yes. Oh my God.
Can't get it out. That's awful. And then we know it's and unbeknownst to these poor suckers, these 4 sharpers are coming in at them. It's like, this is not good. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's nasty. Multiple snapping explosions, at least one of them triggering the row of sharpers buried along the length of the trail. These ones in turn triggering the crackers at the base of the flanking trees, which began toppling inward onto the milling soldiers. Smoke, the screams of the wounded and dying, figures sprawled, pinned beneath trees and trapped by branches. Perrin saw Hedge and 4 other sappers, Spindle included, plunging down the slope to one side of the trail. Munitions flew from their hands. The fallen trees, wooden branches liberally drenched in lantern oil, lit up in a conflagration as the first of the burners exploded. Within the span of a heartbeat, The trail and the entire company trapped upon it were in flames. Perrin thought, abyss below. We're not a friendly bunch, are we? Down at the bottom, well behind the last of the Panions, Picker and her squads had emerged from cover, bows in hand, and were, Perrin hoped, taking down those of the enemy who had managed to avoid the ambush and were attempting to flee. At the moment, all Perrin could hear were screams and the thunderous roar of the fire. The gloom of approaching night had been banished from the trail, and Perrin could feel the heat gusting against his face. He glanced over at Quick Ben. The wizard's eyes were closed. Faint movement on the man's shoulder caught Perrin's attention. A tiny figure of sticks and twine. Perrin blinked. It was gone, and he began to wonder if he'd seen anything at all. The wild flaring and ebb of firelight, the writhing shadows. He thought, I must be imagining things. Not enough sleep. The horror that is the dance of light. Heightened senses. Those damned screams. Were fading now, and the fire itself was losing its raging hunger, unable to reach very far into the rain-soaked forest beyond. Smoke wreathed the trail, drifted through the surrounding bowls. Blackened bodies filled the path, plates of armor rainbow burnished, leather curled and peeling, boots blistered and cracking open with terrible sizzling sounds. Perrin thought, if Hood has reserved a pit for his foulest servants, then the Moranth who made these munitions belong in it, and us, since we've used them. This was not battle. This was slaughter. And what an ambush! These bridge burners are so formidable. They laid the perfect trap for these Panions, and even though they were outnumbered 10-1, they didn't lose anyone in the process.
Dude, this is truly amazing. It's been slightly horrific. And, the bridge burners' effectiveness never ceases to amaze me. And what's crazy is there is a linkage between this incident in particular and the impact it has on a certain individual that's in the Witness trilogy.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah. This bears out.
It was like a PTSD thing or what?
No, yes, no. It's not always there, but it's just something happens that you'll go, oh, because something will happen that'll tie it almost together in a weird way that I just now kind of saw it because I haven't seen this in a long time.
Okay. Mallet slid down to Perrin's side and said, Captain, Moranth are dropping out of the sky on the entrenchments. Dujek's arrived, the first wave with him. Sir, our reinforcements are here. Quickben scraped a hand across his little row of twigs and said, Good, we'll need them. Perrin thought, aye, the seer won't yield these entrenchments without a fight. He said, Thank you, healer. Return to the High Fist and inform him I will join him shortly. Mallet said, Yes, sir. And thus the chapter ends.
Wow, what a chapter.
Yeah, what a chapter. For standout moments, Calor again being so quick to threaten violence while still doing nothing of the sort.
Yes, biding his time. I feel like his life motto is, you will pay.
Biding his time, that reminds me of Gladiator. Commodus has this senator talking to him, and he's talking about the snake. He's like, the snake lays in waits, and its tail is there, and it pretends to be dead, and things begin to nibble on it, and still it waits. And it's like, when you said he's biding his time, I just got the imagery of like this snake just letting pieces of it be bitten while I'm biding my time. And okay, we'll see.
I'm biding my time. Yeah, we'll see.
Brood drawing the line in the sand with Calor on where he stands in viewing the Tist-Andi loyalty to the Alliance, as well as Calor's threats to potentially betray Brood.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm sorry, you just said draws a line. And across this line, you will not.
Exactly. Brood's admonishment of Calor and letting him know that Calor never learned the lessons from his failures throughout his long life.
Well, they cursed him to do that too. You can see it. I guess we can actually see the effects of this curse.
Oh, yes. Yes. You'll live a long life, but you will never find success.
Yeah. So I never thought about that before either. I guess we're actually seeing that curse manifested.
Mm-hmm. High Marshal Sty sucker punching the poor Reeve guard to steal the veteran dung.
Dude, what is that about anyhow? I'm still curious. What is all that about anyhow?
I think part of it is the fun. They're foragers, and they like to burgle people, but separately, they're probably also a little lazy, and they're stealing the dung so they don't have to collect it. So I think it's a combination of those two things.
Okay, I agree. I'll agree on all the above.
The mystery of the large cat following in the bridge burner's footsteps leading up to Coral.
Yeah, this is really curious. Curiouser and curiouser.
And then finally, the bridge burner ambush of the much larger Panyan force. While the tactics employed were absolutely beautiful, Perrin is right in that the method of dispatching those forces was truly horrendous.
Absolutely horrendous. At the same time, it's like, I understand. It's like, you're outnumbered. It's like, you got to do what you got to do. You don't have to. This is why the bridge burners are good. They don't relish this. They did what was necessary.
Yeah. All right. Great job today, Billy.
Hey, man. Great job.
You got any final thoughts before we drop off here?
Just a really great episode. I love. There was some really good stuff, but that ambush, it's really short and sweet, but man, just horrific. But the fact that it was so effective is just, I still stand in amazement at the bridge burners' efficiency, or should I say the bridge burners' efficacy.
Yeah, it's incredible to watch them work. They're so proficient and outnumbered too.
Yes, heavily outnumbered. Heavily.
All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you next week.
See y'all next week.
We thank you all for joining us today.
Again, we really like to thank you for taking the time to be with us, and we've had a really great time talking about the topic today.
If you would like to support our show, you can find us at horsefrogproductions.com, where you can find our Patreon link. Depending on the platform you're listening from, it may also be in the episode description.
And if you'd like to contact us through email, it's at contact@horsefrogproductions.com.